Welcome to the Soar Podcast, the place for creative entrepreneurs with limitless dreams and unconventional stories who want to build healthier, happier, more profitable self-employed businesses. I'm your host, Ray Hyde Cornell. Get ready to soar. Welcome to the Soar Podcast. On today's episode, we have Lori Duguay. Lori, introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them about what it is that you do.
Thank you, Ray, and thanks for having me on the show. So I am a culture catalyst, I call myself. I'm someone who comes in and helps organizations shake up their workplace culture and then recreate it to be that much more motivating for their employees, to create that happier, more productive workplace. So that's essentially what I do. But I've not always done that.
So let's go back a little farther then. Tell me about how you got into this line of work, because I think you were really your first client ever.
Pretty much. Yeah. So for 21 years, I worked for government in a variety of strategic HR positions, but primarily all based out of that same office. Unfortunately, I had one of those, what I reference as a bad boss or bad leader, who found it would be easier to keep that highly knowledgeable person, that highly experienced person in the spot that she was, in order to not have to backfill, in order to not have to deal with the aftermath of ascending that high performing individual to another role. So I stayed in that position longer than I should have, to be honest, at least for the first 15 years. I was in the same position, doing the same thing. And the way that they were able to do that is there was a rule, and that rule still exists today, that when they post another job opening within that ministry or another ministry, they can put a 125-kilometer radius rule on it. So I don't know how much that is in miles, but regardless, they put a geographical limitation restriction that if you apply and you're outside of that radius, you must relocate to be able to fill that position to that local office. I was at 165 kilometers away. So they would put that 125-kilometer rule on every position they posted, because they knew that if they didn't put it on, I would have applied. I would have likely been the successful candidate. And then I would have made a business case for why can't this be done from this satellite office, right? There's no reason why it can. And the pandemic really brought that to the surface, that pretty much anything can be done from anywhere these days, especially the nature of the work that we were doing as ministry. So I eventually realized that I was feeling completely stuck. And after 15 years, I think there was so much resentfulness that had built up that I just decided to plan my exit strategy. Went back to school, did my postgrad in HR management, labor relations, just to get this added credential in my pocket, and started doing some consulting on the side. Eventually, the consulting gigs were taking up pretty much all of my prescribed time off. I would take vacation to work on projects. And I thought, you know what, maybe I can try this full time for a year. So I did it for a year. And within that year, within the first 3 months, I knew I was never going back to government. It just exploded. The demand was so crazy that it was on the tail end, I would say. I guess we're still in the tail end of the pandemic, but it was amongst the Great Resignation, and companies and employers were dealing with the aftermath of mass people exiting their jobs to do other things, of re-examining their whole work-life balance and deciding that, you know what, this isn't for me anymore. I'm just going to try something completely different because I am done doing that double day's work and just really going through the grind, and that hustle culture is over for me, right? So they had a lot of challenges, and suddenly we flipped the labor market where it's a job seekers market. And now people, have to get really creative to attract that next generation of workers, not only to attract them, but to keep those that they do have. So
that's the thing, keeping them, that's the hard part.
Exactly. So that's that exploding demand that suddenly everybody wanted to, okay, Lori, we can't keep doing what we've always done because it's not working. So we need to mix it up, shake it up, tell us what to do to create that culture that will help us to attract those high performing workers. So here I am, only 2 years later, and it's still going super well.
Well, and I think there's more of a demand now than ever before for what you do. And I think this is really important to tap into, because so many of our listeners are going through this should I stay? Should I go? Should I stay in the quote unquote comfort of an employment role where I have medical benefits and, those sorts of things? Or should I venture out on my own? Or is there something in the middle? My parents' generation, I think, was probably one of the last generations of those who were taught you find a job and you stick with it until you retire. And my husband just retired in October of 2022. He's 39. So, I mean, he's not exactly retirement age, but people, when he said that he was going to retire, people were shocked. They're like, wait, you're 39 and you're retiring? How is that possible? And he's like, well, I've been with FedEx for 20 years. And they're like, you're that young and you stayed with a company for 20 years? It's just not heard of anymore.
It is
And
unheard of.
so, what are the things that contribute to people wanting to leave these jobs? Because so many of them do have good pay. I won't say great pay, but good pay and health benefits and retirement plans and things like that. But people are still leaving. Why?
Those are golden shackles. That's what I call
Mm,
them. They're
yeah.
golden handcuffs. For the longest time, when I would mention being unhappy in my government job, feeling like my brain wasn't, there was no room for creativity, there was
Mm,
no room for innovation. It was really going through the motions at that point because I knew that job inside and out, right? And people would be like, "Are you crazy? You got a government job. You got to stick with that." Of course, that was of the generation as well, my mother's generation too, where, they grew up in a recession. So they are, if you found a job, you stayed loyal to your employer.
yeah.
And I was like, I get it, but at what cost? Like,
Right.
you've only got 15 years left. And I'm like, really? Who signs up for 15 more years of this? Like, these are golden shackles. That benefits, that pension is how they keep you in what, that feeling stuck for years. And some people will actually coast until retirement, but that wasn't how I was wired. I'm wired to go, 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 and always be bringing on a new challenge. And I need results, and I needed that, on the regular. And that job wasn't providing it for me anymore. So, why are people feeling stuck? Often within, I think it's because their motivational needs aren't being met at work. There are 10 very specific reasons that make people want to show up. And as I mentioned earlier, not just show up physically, but show up and perform to their full potential. And it's not rocket science, and it's not even a costly. These are low to no cost to the organization to implement, yet they will enable them to reap huge rewards, not only from the performance of their people and the productivity increases, but ultimately their bottom line will increase because people are going to feel engaged and invested in the broader purpose, in something bigger than themselves. And they'll be working towards the achievement of that organizational mission, vision, and the values, right? So those 10 motivational needs, if you will, I can, if you want, I can go through them really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
But in case your listeners are wondering, well, that was fast and furious, I will be providing, I have a one pager on what are the 10 employee needs at work. And so I will certainly be providing the link for them to download that free guide.
Awesome.
And I happen to be writing a book that will deep dive into each of those needs, as well as provide kind of a methodology to start improving within your existing organization the minute you're done reading that book. So 10 needs. Number one, people need to have clarity at work. They need to understand what are their roles, what are the responsibilities, what are the expectations of the organization, and on the flip side, what can they expect from the organization. So providing that clarity at every step or every phase or stage of the journey, be it in the interview as you're trying to attract that next generation, throughout the onboarding and orientation process as you're helping them integrate your workplace culture. How are you facilitating that level of clarity? When you train and develop them on an ongoing basis, when you're going through performance development, how are you helping them revisit their role to ensure that they really still understand it? Has it changed? Have any of their expectations changed? How are you facilitating that level of clarity at every step of that journey through to the exit at the termination? What does that look like? And how are you treating that very important stage of an employee journey as well, right? So I use that journey for every one of my 10 needs. You need to measure the level that you're providing them and think creatively about how you can better provide for those needs at every stage of that journey. So clarity is number one. Communication, the next one. They need to be in the know. They want to know what's going on, know what to expect, as well as understand and be provided with the information they need to do the work they were hired to do. So how are you facilitating information and communication so that it's flowing consistently? It's flowing in 360 directions. So bottom up, or is there ways that they can fuel their feedback and provide feedback to you as an organization on continuous improvement observations that they may have had during the past week or whatnot? How are you providing them with feedback so that they continuously understand, where they stand against their roles and the expectations of the organization, et cetera, et cetera. So clarity, communication. The third one, purpose and impact. People want to know that the work they do makes a difference. More than ever, the younger generations are all about understanding and leaving their mark on the world, and understanding that although, I feel like I'm just keying in some data on the daily, keying that data is actually enabling the achievement of something bigger, and it's making a difference in the lives of people. So how are you helping them not only see the purpose and understand the impact that this company is having on the world, but then how are you, the flip side and the piece that's often missing is how are you helping them connect to that because you did this and that person did that and this person did that, the person outside of our organization was provided with this benefit. How are you showcasing that link, and how are you helping them connect to that, right? So purpose and impact is the third one. The fourth one is rewards and recognition. People want to know that they are valued, they're seen, they're being heard. They want to be, and not just the formal, here's an award ceremony once a year. It needs to be ongoing throughout the year, and it needs to help them feel like the work they do makes a difference, not only to the company, but to that broader purpose that the organization is trying to achieve, and that they matter ultimately. They're not just a number. The next one is growth. They need to know there's room to grow. My situation, I didn't have any growth opportunities. There was no kind of way that I could see myself ascending to something other than my existing position within government because of the location I had chose to live in. So they need to know there's room to grow, or else they're going to go, right? And grow to another role, but maybe even grow within their role. So the next one is training and development. They need to continuously be challenged. And you need to take the time to understand how they prefer to be developed. Not everybody wants these ambitious, leadership development programs. Some people might just want to grow within their existing role, but they still need to grow at some level. So it's about mapping out how they prefer to grow and then helping them develop the plan to achieve that growth. And identifying those stretch goals and helping them develop the plan. So growth, and then training and development are the next ones. And then work-life balance has become increasingly important. It's always been there, but I find the pandemic has really kind of lifted a veil to say, hey guys, hustle culture doesn't have to be the norm.
The elusive work-life balance. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So how they want to know that they're supported to have a life outside of work, and that the employer supports that and they're okay with it and they encourage it. So what kind of, right to disconnect policies do you have in place? How are you affording flexible working arrangements to your employees if it's operationally feasible? How are you going to structure that work environment to provide the utmost flexibility? Maybe you can't offer them to work remotely because it makes no sense operationally, but maybe there's a way you can actually create opportunities for them to contribute to how they schedule themselves in the day and what are their flex hours. Maybe they can come in later because they got kids to drop off in the morning and leave later, or maybe there's ways to apply that flexibility that's low to no cost, without having to cut it to the 4-day work week, which we're seeing more and more organizations move towards. So work-life balance is the next one. Leadership, of course, is extremely important. And we've heard the adage that people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad bosses. So I was someone who had one of those bosses that wasn't necessarily as supportive as they could have been of my growth and development. And I can attest that in and of itself was enough for me to start planning my exit strategy, right? So certainly making sure that your leadership has the tools to move away from this command and control style of leadership, which will no longer resonate with these younger generations, and adopt a more people-powered, a more people-centric approach to leadership where we coach and empower you. To that point, the next need is autonomy and empowerment. So people want to know that we trust you to do the job that we hired you to do. So I'm going to give
Not
you that autonomy.
micromanaging.
Not going to micromanage you. I'm going to provide you that autonomy, all the while supporting you if you do need be, and coaching you through stepping into your full potential. So instead of telling and saying, here's the answer every time, I'm going to work with you to help you apply that critical thinking that I know you're capable of. And let's help you hone that skill so that the next time you're actually not going to have to come to me altogether. And the final one is relationships. People go to work for, connecting with other people. And these are people they spend up to, 8, 12, sometimes 14 hours a day with, depending on the industry. So how are you facilitating that connection? How are you helping them? And here's a perfect example. Starting a new job, how intimidating is that, right? So why are we not facilitating those connections before they even start? Give them enough information, the communication piece, right? The clarity. Send them a frequently asked questions document before they even start. And here, would you like to start to learn more about us? Here's how you can find out more. Here's our handbook, our company handbook, if you want to know how we roll. When you start, we're going to be introducing you to 2 people, your buddy, Julie, whose sole role will be to be your lifeline within those first few weeks. This is the person you'll want to go to ask those, unspoken rules. Where do people typically go for breaks? How do we roll? And understand that cultural piece. So her job is to transmit and to facilitate your integration into our workplace culture. The technical, the mentor, that'll be Bob. Bob's job is to transmit all of the technical, job-specific stuff to you. So right away, you've connected them with 2 people, thereby reduced that intimidation factor and facilitated the growth of their network internally, which will help them, it'll help them invest in that level of loyalty, which will keep them around.
While also making it okay for them to ask questions, because that's another thing
and
that
normalizing that.
Yes, I remember it's been a long time since I was an employee, but in my short stint of employment, I remember starting and I was in a mental hospital as a triage specialist at intake. And I remember thinking, oh my God, if I ask a question, I am going to get in trouble, or they're going to think I don't know what I'm doing, or that I'm not the right one for the job. If I just had someone who was my peer who I could go, hey, where's the break room? I wouldn't have wandered around like a total nutcase, probably looking more like a patient than an employee so many times in my first couple of weeks.
Exactly. And it makes you, it provides an opportunity for development. I talked about growth and development. Maybe developmental opportunities for certain individuals is acting as that buddy. For them, that's wow, they trust me enough to impart my knowledge and the kind of organizational knowledge to this next generation of workers. So that's kind of cool. And I'm going to take advantage of that leadership role, right? And it's kind of a win-win as far as I'm concerned, because you can engage not only the new worker at the onset and provide them this real seamless kind of integration into the organization, but you're also offering this unique developmental opportunity to the person acting as the mentor or the buddy.
Well, and I think it's also fascinating what you didn't mention on that list, which is you did not mention health insurance benefits. You did not mention salary. You did not mention work perks or any kind of like gift card compensation for commissions on sale. Like you didn't mention any of that. And I think that really speaks to you being very tapped in and attuned to what people prioritize nowadays. 20, 30 years ago, the priority was putting food on the table for the family and being the provider. And that's why, how many generations of dads came home pissed off, went right to the wet bar, had their scotch, and then grumbled off to bed, because that was their sole purpose of providing money for the family.
The grind was to provide. Yeah.
Yes. And nowadays, that's not the priority. I mean, I know one of the big driving factors behind why I left the world of employment was for freedom and to feel like I had control over my own quality of life, and that the things that I was struggling with at the time would have the space for me to actually address them, for me to heal. And I think that's a big shift in the past few decades. Is we've gradually become a culture and society that prioritizes quality of life over merely just paying the bills and making our way.
Exactly. And so many people, when they start working with them, they say, Lori, I don't have a budget. I don't have a budget to like pay more. And I'm like, do you know how many people I know who have left some when I had decided to leave government? Here's a perfect example. I was applying for jobs outside of government and people were like, are you crazy? You're going to go to the private sector? They don't pay as much. And I was like, I've already resolved myself to a $20,000 pay cut, and I'm okay with that because that's what it's worth at the very minimum. That is what it's worth for me to be able to use my brain on the daily. And I was recently speaking with two other people who left long-term, and I'm talking 20-plus-year careers that were safe and paid really well. And both of them had an amount in their mind that they were willing to give up to be able to feel like they can fully contribute to their workplace.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
speaks volumes in terms of what people are willing to give up in order to attain that level of independence, that level of just fulfillment in their day-to-day workplace. Mm-hmm.
We are going to take a super short commercial break, but when we come back, I want to ask you about another area of your expertise, which is around motivation and really cultivating that in an authentic way. So we will be right back. Hey, Ray here. Ever wish this whole creative self-employment thing was easier? Like, wouldn't it be nice if there was, I don't know, a step-by-step guide for building a successful freelance business? You know where I'm going with this, right? That guide does exist. Back in the day when I first started out hustling and side gigging, I wish I had a roadmap to fast track my way to self-employed success. So I made one for you. No matter where you are in business, I guarantee you this guide can help you get to the next stage faster, and the next, and the next. Whether you're still deciding if ditching the W-2 is right for you, or if you're struggling with your pricing, business formation, client acquisition, sales, or even health insurance, this guide has everything you need. Get your free copy of the complete guide to building a successful freelance business at chironconsulting.us/guide. We are back with Lori Duguay. So Lori, you've given us these 10 needs, these 10 requirements for people to feel like they are in a job that can really fulfill them long-term, not just in the basic level of needs financially or, what society tells us we should look for in a good job. So what about for those who have decided that either employment is not right for them, or maybe they want to venture out and create their own business where they can really embody these 10 needs and provide these to other people who have never had them? I mean, what does that look like when you're starting out essentially from scratch and forging your own path? Like, how can people bring these principles to life for themselves and really live that autonomy principle that you talked about?
That's a really, really great question. I think it's about number one, understanding where you sit on the spectrum of those needs, right? And figuring out, okay, there's priorities, right? And there are, the same way I was willing to give up $20,000, there are certain needs that for me aren't the end of the world. I'm okay if, communication, because I'm a very, driven person and I tend to ask a lot of questions. If the communication isn't happening, I will find my answers in some way, shape, or form, right? So there's certain needs, understanding which of those needs are your non-negotiables, your price of admission, if you will. And if you're feeling stuck and you're feeling misaligned on a daily basis, and you don't feel that there's any way you could work with your existing company, and that in your mind, there's no company that would satisfy your prioritized needs, and that you want to make a difference and be kind of the master of your own destiny, then certainly self-employment, 100% the way to go. I think I got myself more intimidated by the risk factor. So I think risk managing that and understanding what's the worst that can happen. Have you ever had trouble finding a job? No. Guess what, folks? It's a job seeker's market out there. People are on the hunt all the time. What better time to try something on your own? And if and when it doesn't pan out, if that's the case, which it likely won't, because gig economy is here to stay. People are doing these side, they start with side hustles and then transform them into these full-time gigs. And it's the way to go these days. Even as a business owner now, rather than bring in employees, I have a bunch of associates that I work, and they provide the expertise and the knowledge and the service that not necessarily I can bring, but I'll bring them in onto a project with me as a partner, as an associate. And it's all through their own business. So I think
Yeah.
that whole business model is here to stay. But what better time to try it out than now? Because if worse comes to worse and you're feeling too uncertain with your decision, you can always go back to the labor market or work for an employer. And I think sometimes to do that, what's the worst that can happen conversation, and to draw it out, it is really eye-opening. Because I remember my first year, I was allowed 1 year, that safe job. They gave me a year unpaid to try something else out. So I tried something else out. And for me, knowing that I had that safety net to fall back on was really reassuring, to let me just try this out. And that if in 3 months, I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? Bring me back, right? And I'm just right away going to be going back, which is exactly what I did not end up doing, because within the first 3 months, I was like, wow, I should have done this years ago. But I don't think I had. Every experience has contributed. This will sound a bit woo-woo, but every experience, including my 21-year career, which I'm so grateful for, because it's provided me with my structured way of thinking that is really appreciated in the private sector, with my compliance-driven kind of brain that helps organize, structure, and provide for standardized ways of doing things, which really improves your overall workplace. Like, it gave me so much experience and knowledge that I'm now translating on the daily and using every day, that I'm super grateful. But I know that if I had quit earlier, I think those last 7 years where they finally decided to provide me opportunities for growth, those were my best 7 years of my career. And they gave me 100% of the knowledge and experience I need to be doing what I do now. So I think if you're feeling stuck, figure out, what is it that I really, really love in the work that I do? And how could I make this into my own business? I had actually Googled, seriously. I was that girl. I Googled how to figure out your purpose, because I knew I was unhappy and I couldn't figure out why. And there were these 15 questions that you could ask yourself. It was like one random, Dr. Google prescribed article on 15 questions. And one of them was, what are one of the things that, make you lose track of time? What are one of the things that you did as a kid that you were so frustrated when your parents called you in for supper or to come and eat? What were some of those things? And, once I determined that I don't think that I could be like a 90s hip hop dancer professionally at my age, I started looking into, what are some of those other things? And it was always bringing people together and figuring out a plan and organizing events and organizing things where people could all contribute, but then helping everyone contribute in a way that was meaningful to them, to whatever we were planning or whatever activity we were doing, and making sure we were fully inclusive of all of the friends that were there. And I thought, this has got to be a thing that I can do on a broader scale, because let's be honest, the workplace is just another schoolyard. Right? It's another recess. It really is. There's some bullying, there's intimidation, and I'm also a dispute resolution, like I'm a mediator. So I do conflict resolution. So how can I bring these concepts that I love doing then and make it into a career? And that's what I ended up bridging into.
Well, and whether you're going to be staying in a traditional employment job, or whether you're going to be launching your own business and kind of forging your own path in the world, there's always something that comes up, which is motivation. And this is the other thing that I think you have a unique perspective on. For you, you've said that you can't always motivate the individual, but you can create an environment that is authentically motivating, that doesn't feel like you are. We're not talking about putting those like very trite posters on the wall that say, reach for your dreams, or hang in there with the little cat hanging from the tree. It's not about that. How do you actually motivate those around you? And perhaps more importantly, because this has to start with you before you can inspire anybody else to be motivated, how do you motivate yourself to either build the business that you want, that embodies all of these values that we're talking about, or to bring those values to the workplace?
It's when you said we can't motivate a lot of people, you can't motivate anyone else. The only thing you actually have control over is yourself, right? So, but that highly motivating work environment is a work environment that provides for those needs that we referenced in the first part of the show, those 10 needs. So I think it's a question of measuring yourself and how motivated you're feeling in your current gig or job, thinking about, is my company already providing for these needs, which if not, might be contributing to my feeling what I'm feeling today, that lack of motivation and that lack of drive. Can I work with them to start to provide them in terms of, I feel like I've got no room to grow. Am I missing something? Where do you see me perhaps growing within this company in the next few years, and working with your supervisor, your manager, and asking them those real honest questions to see whether or not maybe you've just missed the mark in terms of recognizing some of those opportunities out there. But if your decision is to plan your exit strategy, I say you start with, talking about visualizing what that ideal state looks like. What would my ideal day look like? And then mapping out a plan to get there. Understanding that it ebbs and flows and it's not going to happen overnight. You didn't end up feeling like this overnight. So it's going to take time. So I often, when I'm coaching clients, I ask them, what's the biggest baby step you can take today? Ask yourself that question daily and commit and hold yourself accountable to actually delivering on that baby step. Join a community of like-minded people. I found it game-changing when I started my business, taking different training and development opportunities, although the content itself was valuable-ish. What was the most valuable was connecting with other individuals who had also made that decision to become their own boss, and to have them along to navigate that journey with you, to collectively troubleshoot some of your challenges, to normalize some of the stuff that you're going to encounter in those first few months that you have no idea. For me personally, social media and growing my social media presence, putting myself out there in general wasn't something that I'm like, no, just come in. Yeah. Just call me, let's have a chat. Let's talk about your pain points, and let's talk about how we can help, collectively solve these. That was my jam. The business development piece and growing your social media presence to grow your following. Yes. Not a fan of it. But when I started to surround myself with a community of people who they didn't really love it either, but then they'd be like, well, I discovered this one thing that when you do that, it does this. Oh, okay, cool. I'm going to try that. Do you mind if I try that? Oh yeah, no, we're all in the same journey. So we'd share. So if you're able to connect to a community, also if you're able to connect with a coach, that was game changing for me. I'm a coach. I'm a professional coach who has her own professional coach. Why? Yeah. Because all good coaches know that you're never done. And every elite athlete had, a team of experts supporting and guiding and coaching them along their journey of development to get to that elite status. Well, I'm not going to be, closed-minded enough to think that I'm an expert in everything and I don't need any other expertise. No. Right. Staying open-minded and understanding that there's always going to be resources. You just need to know where to look for them. And if you don't know where to look for them, to find that community that can help you connect to them.
Well, and you've mentioned a lot of very specific, practical ways to build motivation into your work life. But really what I'm hearing is they kind of fall into two categories. One is having that beautiful vision on the horizon that you're working towards, having something to look forward to, having something you're working towards, whether that's ways to level up within the organization, or you said planning your exit strategy. Maybe you have something bigger and better that you're creating on your own that you're looking forward to. So that's one category. And the other one is having support along the way, whether that's peers, a mentor, or even just this isn't really but having a company culture around you that is supportive and encouraging and nurturing and gives you clear expectations and great communication and really helps you feel like you're contributing with impact to something.
Absolutely. 100%.
So, Lori, you are absolutely fascinating. I know we're going to have you on for another episode because we didn't even scratch the surface on the things that you can teach us. But in the meantime, where can people check you out?
Well, I've recently undergone a new a rebrand, so they can check out our new website at www.BBE People Powered, because that's what we want people to be. We want them to recognize the power of their people. So bepeoplepowered.com, www.bepeoplepowered.com, and that free guide to the employee needs and to just what we need at work is on there for a download if they want to go ahead and visit that link. They can also connect on all of social media. I am on LinkedIn, on Twitter, LinkedIn as in Lori Duguay, or the company page, People Powered Solutions. On Facebook, same two people as well. On Twitter, I'm recently on TikTok, but I've only got one video posted. Like I said, folks, it's a journey, and I'm really not quite to the whole TikTok video level yet. And
TikTok's a whole other world.
Yes,
Instagram.
exactly. So on Instagram, I am Lori, the people person, if they want to connect with me there.
Beautiful. And you have a book coming out this summer. Tell me about your book.
I do. So it initially started writing it, explaining those 10 needs for organizations. So thinking of CEOs and HR, CHROs who are trying to develop a more positive, more productive work environment. It's called the Happiness Factor, and how to build a more positive and productive workplace. But then I started realizing that even if I'm someone who's feeling stuck, it's a great book to understand what are those needs. And there's a deep dive with stories to each of those needs to help them kind of resonate with folks. And then there's a methodology, super simple yet highly effective, 3M method, map, measure, and mobilize, to start implementing and improving on your workplace culture immediately once you're done the book. And there's actually an action plan that you can that you build throughout the book. So at the end, you have a to-do list to hold yourself accountable to making that change.
I absolutely love action-oriented resources, because we can read about and talk about things all day long, but you have to put them into action. So we will put the links to all of those goodies into the show notes. Thank you so much for being here, Lori.
Thanks for having me, Ray.
Hey, Ray here again. Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, please subscribe and rate us in your favorite podcasting platform. Want to be a guest on the show or know someone who has an amazing story of entrepreneurship? Apply on our website at chironconsulting.us/podcast.